Bible Study Guide, Day 44, Leviticus 1-4. Leviticus 1 begins with instructions on the burnt offering, which was a voluntary offering brought to God as an act of devotion and worship. It was meant to be completely consumed by fire on the altar, symbolizing complete surrender and dedication to God. If the offering was a burnt offering from the herd, it had to be a male without blemish. The offerer would lay his hand on the head of the animal, symbolically transferring his sins onto it, and then kill it at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priests would then sprinkle the blood around the altar and arrange the wood and offering on top of it. If the offering was a burnt offering from the flock, it had to be a male sheep or goat without blemish. The same process was followed, but the animal would first be brought to the north side of the altar before being killed. If the offering was a burnt offering of birds, it had to be a turtle dove or pigeon. The priest would wring its neck and then sprinkle its blood on the side of the altar. The feathers were removed and the bird was torn apart by the wings without dividing them completely, and then the priest would arrange it on the altar. The burnt offering was a sweet aroma to the Lord and was meant to remind the Israelites of their need for atonement and their dependence on God. It also foreshadowed the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus Christ, who gave himself as a perfect and complete offering for our sins. As Christians, we are also called to offer ourselves as living sacrifices to God, Romans 12:1. In other words, our entire lives should be dedicated to serving and pleasing God. The grain offering, also known as the meal offering, was another voluntary offering brought to God. It consisted of fine flour, oil, and frankincense, with no leaven or honey allowed. The purpose of the grain offering was to acknowledge God as the source of all blessings and to express gratitude for his provision. It was also a way to consecrate daily activities, such as eating and working to God. God commanded that every grain offering be seasoned with salt, as seen in Leviticus 2:13. This was not just for flavor, but also to symbolize the covenant between God and his people. Salt was a valuable commodity in ancient times, and by incorporating it into their offerings, the Israelites were acknowledging that everything they had belonged to God. As Christians, we are also called to be the salt of the earth, Matthew 5:13, bringing flavor and preservation to a decaying world. We are also reminded to always season our words with grace and love, just as every grain offering was seasoned with salt. The fellowship or peace offering was another voluntary offering brought to God. It could be from the herd or flock and had different purposes, such as thanksgiving, fulfillment of a vow, or a free will offering. The process for the fellowship offering was similar to that of the burnt offering, but with some differences. The animal had to be without blemish and killed at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest would sprinkle the blood around the altar, but the entire animal would not be consumed by fire. The choice portion, the fat, was burned and offered to God. The rest was given to the priests and eaten by the offerer and his family in a communal meal with God. The fellowship offering symbolized peace and reconciliation between God and his people. Through this offering, they could enjoy fellowship with him and with one another. As Christians, we have been reconciled to God through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. We can now have peace with God and with one another, and we are called to extend this fellowship to others as well. The sin offering was a mandatory offering brought by individuals or the entire congregation to atone for unintentional sins committed. It was only for sins that could be atoned for, not intentional or rebellious sins. When priests sinned or the whole congregation sinned, the process for the sin offering was similar to that of the burnt offering, but with some differences. The animal had to be without blemish and killed at the entrance of the tent of meeting. The priest would sprinkle the blood around the altar and then dip his finger in it and sprinkle it 7 times before the veil of the sanctuary. The blood was also put on the horns of the altar of incense, and the rest was poured at the base of the altar of burnt offering. The choice portions were burned and offered to God, but unlike other offerings, even priests could not eat any part of it. The rest was taken outside the camp and burned in a clean place. If a leader or member of the community sinned, the sin offering process was similar, but the animals were slaughtered at the place of the burnt offering. The blood was not brought inside the sanctuary and sprinkled before the veil. Instead, it was put on the horns of the altar of burnt offering and poured at the base. The sin offering was a reminder of the seriousness of sin and the need for atonement. It also foreshadowed the ultimate sacrifice of Jesus, who took upon himself the punishment for our sins so that we could be reconciled to God. As Christians, we are called to confess our sins and receive forgiveness through Christ's sacrifice. 1 John 1:9. We can also have assurance that our sins are completely forgiven, not just temporarily atoned for like the sin offerings in Leviticus. As we continue to read through the book of Leviticus, we see how these sacrifices ultimately point to and find their fulfillment in Jesus Christ. It is a beautiful reminder of his perfect sacrifice and the grace and mercy that he extends to us. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to help us spread the word. God bless you.